once the Flyers do get bounced, because they are going to lose to Carolina, I really have no problems with any other team winning, except maybe Vegas, because of the whole Tater Torts factor of it all. But other than that, like, I'm good with any other team winning, so.
Yeah, I'm cool with any other team winning, but the Flyers, no, just none of that, please. I mean, I'm still mad at them for beating the Penguins, and I'm still mad that they ended their playoff run so early. I mean, it wasn't just, we could have had a long run. We could have had a big time run to the Cup, but the Flyers decided to make those possibilities and turn them into stolen moments.
Points, man. Points. Very, very well played. And welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on all sides of planet Earth. And the way that we measure that distinction is we travel to Ukraine, and we go all the way to Uganda, but we take the long way around. This podcast is called Hey, Listen to This. And it is hosted by two dastardly good-looking men who share the same middle name. I'm the one. I'm the only. I'm the one who, at the end of the day is advocating for, if we listen to each other's hearts, we will find we're never too far apart. And maybe love is the reason why, for the first time ever, we're seeing it eye to eye. Ryan James Kearns.
And I am the one, the only, you really couldn't go a whole episode without mentioning some sort of lyrics at all, could you? Matthew James Durzik. And for those of you who don't know what it is that we do here on Hey, Listen to This, we talk about music, man, and we pick an album that we like to talk about, or perhaps an album that is following a theme, or an album that's a new release. But in any case, we pick an album, and we talk about that album, me and Ryan do, track by track, line by line, note by note. We pick out what we like, what we don't like, what we think are our favorite tracks, what tracks we think might suck if that were to come up. And at the end of every episode, we give the album that we reviewed a rating out of 10. We recommend an album based on the album we just talked about, and we pick another album to start the cycle anew the very next episode. So, Ryan, what did we talk about last week here on Hey, Listen to This?
On last week's episode of Hey, Listen to This, you and I dived into the 2024 release by the band Los Campesinos, and that album is entitled All Hell. My overall thoughts about doing the review, it was a fun, good time. I had an absolute, overall pretty good time. That's my overall thoughts. It was definitely one of those reviews where I brought one of my bands to the table, a Ryan Kearns kind of band, and I shared it with you, and it was a pleasure to see your reaction. And for the most part, you had a pretty good reaction, not as positive as mine, but you didn't really poo-poo on anything. So yeah, I'm gonna turn the table back over to you, Matthew. Are you vibing the same way I am?
Yeah, your description of what we talked about last week was very accurate. There were maybe one or two missteps where we kind of disagree, but for the most part, we were vibing pretty much the whole time. That album, again, very much in your camp, but I appreciate a lot of the music you bring forward because it has a certain sound that I have come to appreciate. I think it was a good time. There were a couple of songs that definitely stood out to me, and one that very, very much stood out to me as just a really strong song for the time that we live in. And if you're curious as to what those songs are and what our opinions are, the episode is up where you can go listen to it either right now or later on after you're done with this episode. And if you're looking for instructions on how to do that, we will give you those instructions later on in the episode.
Well, with all that being said, Matthew, we've officially put the Los Campesinos into their bed, And we got done talking about All Hell. I mean, that's the year of our Lord 2026, in terms of, like, the everyday climate. So, what are we talking about on this week's episode of Hey, Listen to This? Are we talking about an album where there's going to be a lot of words and a lot of, things to say? Or are we talking about something completely different from that?
We are talking about the latter. We are talking about a album that I'm pretty sure only has 5 words on the entire album, and that is just part of an intro count-in. And that album that we're going to be talking about today is from 63 years before the album we talked about last week, because we are going from 2024 to 1961. And the album we're talking about today is the jazz album entitled The Blues and the Abstract Truth by saxophonist and composer Oliver Nelson. Now, for those of you wondering what a Oliver Nelson is, I'll give you a rather brief description of this, and then me and Ryan will share our thoughts on who is this guy. So, who is Oliver Nelson? He was born in St. Louis, Missouri on June 4th, 1932, and his musical journey started at age 6 when he, who was a sibling to a pair of musicians, decided to become a musician himself. He learned to play piano at the age of 6, and then 5 years later, he would enter the world of woodwinds, learning to play the saxophone at age 11. And after that, he would spend his teenage years gigging around the St. Louis area in different bands, and after a while, made some money, did some stuff here and there. He joined the service. He went into the Marine Corps, but he did not pick up a gun. He continued to pick up a saxophone, or clarinet. It just described him as playing woodwinds, so you fill in the blank there. But when he was over in the Marine Corps, he attended a concert by the Tokyo Philharmonic Orchestra in 1952, and for that, it was a transformative experience for him, because he had grown up in 30s and 40s St. Louis, where there was a very distinct kind of music and a very distinct kind of sound, and the sounds of white America and the sounds of black America were pretty separate at the time. Jazz was in one column, classical was in the other. And then he heard the Tokyo Philharmonic Orchestra and said, wait a minute, I can just kind of do whatever the hell I want. And so he decided at that point he was going to not just become a performer, but a composer as well. So after his service, he came back to the United States, came back to the state of Missouri, and graduated from Washington University of St. Louis in 1958 with a master's degree in music theory and composition. Soon after that, he continued honing his craft and not only would become a sideman for the likes of Count Basie, Quincy Jones, and Duke Ellington, but he also became a band leader in his own right, releasing his first 6 albums on Prestige Records between 1959 and 1961, because jazz albums back in the day didn't need several years to come up with. Nobody was asking, where's your follow-up, man? Where's your follow-up? No, you just pick up your instrument, you meet up with a bunch of other dudes who pick up their instruments, you go into a studio, you play your instruments, and if it sounds good, you put on record. If not, you try again tomorrow, you put that on the record, and then you release the record. It was a much, much simpler time. So, after his first 6 albums, which were, again, released on Prestige, in 1961 he switched to Impulse Records, a very prestigious jazz label, and he released the album that we're talking about today, entitled The Blues and the Abstract Truth, featuring himself on alto and tenor saxophone, Eric Dolphy on alto saxophone and flute, George Barrow on baritone saxophone, Freddie Hubbard on trumpet, Bill Evans on piano, Paul Chambers on bass, and Roy Haynes on drums. Now, before we get into our thoughts about it, some of you super fans of the pod may recognize a couple of those names, like, hey, wait a minute, Bill Evans, Paul Chambers, I've heard those names before. Yes, you have. We discussed them on the Miles Davis Kind of Blue episode, released several months ago, and part of Ryan's 11-piece series Into the Past. So, yeah, that is where we're at today. We're at 1961 with The Blues and the Abstract Truth. And for further delineation, I will read verbatim in the liner notes I have for the CD Oliver Nelson's own words that he published in the original liner notes for the album in 1961. Quote, classical music of the 19th century and contemporary music of our own 20th century brought about the need for adopting a different perspective in order to create music that was meaningful and vital. This was done in many ways too numerous and complicated to mention here, but one device which has always been successful in both classical music and in present-day jazz is to let the musical ideas determine the form and try to do so, and shape of a musical composition. In effect, that is what I have tried to do here. The blues, which is a 12-bar form, and the form and chord structure I've Got Rhythm, being 32 measures in length, was my material for all of the compositions on this album. The augmentation of the forms themselves comes from thematic motifs and melodic ideas. So again, in a similar sense to what we discussed with the Miles Davis album, he is setting down a baseline idea for music and letting everybody else take it from there. So with that being said, Ryan, what is your relationship to Oliver Nelson? And if you don't have one, what were your expectations heading into this week?
So, as a music fan, as I am, I'm always wanting to dive into more jazz like this as a whole. It's been kind of a personal, quest of mine to follow different musicians through different kind of jazz projects, a la what we have here today with Bill Evans and Paul Chambers, because as you referenced, we've talked about them in Kind of Blue, and I know that they were also members of Davis's band for a hot minute, and Bill Evans is a very, very, very famous jazz pianist. So initially had no idea who Oliver Nelson is, or who he would be. I mean, he's since passed. I would think so. I digress. So, just an overall overview though. Didn't know who the artist was. Very excited about covering another jazz release as a whole, because I'm always one that willing, happy, curious about adding another jazz album into my rotation. And when I saw the familiar names of Mr. Bill Evans and Paul Chambers, alongside the other names of Eric Dolphy and Freddie Hubbard, I was, you can color me interested, man. I was very intrigued by what this album would have to offer due to the personnel that was going to be on it, man. So I'm going to flip it back over to you, because I feel like you have a little bit more of an experience with Mr. Nelson as a whole, or maybe you just walked into Half Price Books, you saw this album on CD, and you're like, hey, I know Bill Evans and Paul Chambers, and this is $1. Let me pick it up, man.
You're starting to notice some themes that I have, but that is not the case with this case. So I really haven't dived too much into Oliver Nelson as a whole. In fact, I'll be completely honest with you, the only real album I've ever listened to by him is this one. But it was introduced to me by my dad probably about a decade ago or something close to that, where he had this in his jazz collection, which very well could have been part of his dad's jazz collection, because my grandfather loved jazz. He lived in Manhattan for several years, and he grew up in, had stints as a pastor in Philadelphia, in the Cleveland area, in Pittsburgh. But everywhere he went, he loved jazz, and he loved listening to his jazz records. So I listened to this album, and it triggered something in me. I was like, oh, this sounds really good, actually. This sounds like some interesting stuff. And funny enough, this was about a decade ago from when we're recording now. I had forgotten that 6 years prior to that, or 7 or 8 years prior to that, I was actually at a show and part of a show where this song was actually played. Because when I was in high school, in my senior year, I qualified for the District Jazz Ensemble concert for PMEA District 5. And I was part of the first band. The second band, sort of the runners-up, again, for lack of a better term. They played 5 songs, we played 5 songs, and I had forgotten that the first track off this album, Stolen Moments, was one of the tracks they had played. So fast forward to about 3 years ago, roughly around 2023, I'm listening to the CD of our performance. I'm like, oh yeah, they did do that song. So it was kind of a weird time lapse of, hey, I remember this song, but I don't remember that this song being played. I just remember it being recorded professionally. So yeah, that's just a weird sort of backstory. But aside from that, I've continued to listen to this album on and off over the last several years because it's not just the opening track that has stuck with me. It's a couple of other songs that have really done their number. And yeah, we'll get into it more detail. But yeah, my experience with Oliver Nelson as a whole was pretty much just this album, but not a bad experience to have.
What experience will I think that this album has to bring to the table? I guess we're going to have to find out. One way or another, man, we're about to do it. We're about to dive into The Blues in the Abstract by Oliver Nelson. So, you talked so much. You talked so much about the song Stolen Moments. You literally did the intro based off of that. So, I think it is the right thing to do and allow you to kick us off, man, with the opening track being, Stolen Moments. I will not steal this moment for you, man.
Thank you. I very much appreciate that. So, Stolen Moments. This track. First you get the opening crescendos of the horns, which set a very blue, very jazzy, very smoky mood. Like, if you think about what jazz sounded like in the late 50s and early 60s, it sounded like this. It sounded very bluesy. It sounded very almost noir in a sense. Like, you could just hear the very distinct vibes coming from this track. And what makes this track so good is that chorus where they're just laying back and just having just this soft feel, this velvety feel to their playing. That's not easy. Like, it's not easy to have that sort of consistent restraint when playing like this. And there are moments on this album where the restraint comes off and the dogs run wild. We will get to that very specific metaphor later on. But the way that these guys, especially Freddie Hubbard and especially Oliver Nelson, on that chorus, trade off that little lick towards the end where Freddie Hubbard plays that da 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 da, and then you get the 4 bars of Nelson dropping that to another octave. It just sounds so jazzy and so smooth. And you can almost just smell the cigarette smoke coming off of this track. Like, just how very of its time in the moment that it is. It just sounds very good. And it sounds incredibly professional. But it also doesn't sound very uptight, which is, I think, is the key here. Like, old school jazz, like Woody Herman and Benny Goodman, they had, they were very good, but they had a very stiff, very rigid organization to their composition. Here, as I had mentioned, Nelson is just going for vibes. He's going for a basic structure to which to build upon. It's basically the Minecraft of music, to put it in modern terms. And then you get to the solos themselves, starting with Freddie Hubbard, and he just cuts through the smoothness like a knife. And even though he doesn't stray anywhere off the rails like we'll get to later, his solo is very much a clash of vibes where he is being very stately, being very powerful with his trumpet solo, and there's almost a staccato type of nature to the way he's playing, while in the background you have Bill Evans, Paul Chambers, and Roy Haynes just laying back and setting that groundwork for everyone else to just do what they can. Hubbard's trumpet solo is just wonderful. It is a wonderful solo to start off the solo section. And then you get to Eric Dolphy, who at the start of the track is playing on alto. And you can hear there are multiple saxophones echoing and playing in tandem with Hubbard when he's doing his motif on the chorus. But Dolphy just, it says, screw it, I'm just going to play a flute on this track instead. And he goes in for a flute solo. And it flows very well, man. Like, it fits the scene. It fits the oeuvre of the track just so well. It's not as emphatic or as stick to your ear as Hubbard's is, but that's not a bad thing. I mean, we all love a little jazz flute every now and then, and Eric Dolphy just decides, hey, I'm going to play a flute for this track. Cool, let's do it. And it sounds really good. And then you get to Nelson, who's playing on this track is just so smooth, and he is very much adapting a bluesy tone. He is not playing strictly along with the chords, and he doesn't for a lot of this album. He is going based on how he feels. Like, he's not, again, straying too far off the beaten path, but he is very much staying smooth in his tone while also challenging the jazziness and the exploratory nature of what he's trying to go for, and he just knocks it out of the park on his solo. And then you get to Bill Evans, who is just doing Bill Evans things, which is to say he's got a fantastic solo on this track, and it just comes just like a flower petal into the 70-degree wind on this song. Like, it just flows so easily and so smoothly. And again, Chambers and Haynes, and I'll even throw George Barrow in there too, like, they just do a great job of keeping things rooted and keeping things flowing. Like, this track doesn't lose momentum for as laid back as it is. It maintains momentum, it maintains feel, it doesn't drop. It's just so consistent. And then you get to the chorus at the very end, which again just has everybody fading out this nice, easy way before just ending on that little bit of a clash of notes at the very end to create this ominous finish. Yeah, this is just one of the all-time great jazz songs, man, and I'm pretty sure you could guess by the words that I used, but I'll just be official with it. In my top 3 and bottom nothing, this is at the top at number 1.
Fair enough, man. Fair enough. And before I even utter one word about solo moments, like you, I have a top 3 in bottom nothing. My thoughts about solo moments, though, kind of differ from you in a couple different aspects. But, yeah, I'll just do the rundown and, just talk about my overall thoughts and feelings about the track, because, I mean, that's the point of this podcast, I guess. So, but, yeah, starting with the intro. Solid intro. I feel like coming right out of the gate, you talked about the laid-back elements of the track. I feel like it was a little sloppy getting out of the gate. Like, a drunk man coming out of a bar being like, hey, okay, where are my keys? Okay, I can drive now. But, like, within those moments, it has some clever composition techniques that I did appreciate. And one of those clever composition techniques is something that you illustrated in your overview, is when they're handing off the lick that is played like towards the back half of the outro. Like, that right there was one of my highlights of the track as a whole. And the main melody of the intro, like the home bass, is pretty good. I would agree. It for sure has that laid back devil may care kind of attitude with it that you illustrated in your dissection. And also the dynamic shifts that you hear within the intro, I enjoyed, as you did, with the opening part and like the outside of the solo section. So now diving into the solos, I'm just gonna say it. Freddie's solo was a little bit of a mixed bag for me. Like, at first, like, I was listening, I'm like, oh, okay. He's basically kind of doing a Miles Davis influenced solo, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, you kind of illustrated his background in the overview of this episode, so that makes sense, and it's very much of its time, and it's very good. And not saying that, like, you have to stick within the lane and just doing, like, a minimal kind of, like, feeling out kind of solo, because you can do whatever you want, essentially, because it's jazz. You can kind of, like, switch it up if you want to. However, when he does switch it up in his solo in terms of his style, honestly, that's where I kind of got lost a little bit. And there was one spot, like, it's one thing to go from doing a more feel vibey kind of solo to switching it off to kind of doing runs and showing off your skill. But there was a moment specifically where he just seemed like he was kind of stuck on a flutter tongue, like, lick, and he kept repeating it, and I'm like, okay, dude, like, move on. Like, I'm not interested in this. But yeah, that's my thoughts about Freddie's solo. It's one of the honestly, it's my least favorite solo on the track. Thankfully enough, though, you do get Eric coming in with the flute. And yeah, Eric Dolphy is pretty good as a jazz player. Who would have thunk, man? His solo overall is pretty solid. Like I kind of already illustrated, I do enjoy him more than Freddie's. He doesn't really go for the minimal vibey kind of aspect. He more goes for just writing the melody of the song while showing off, like, some minor skill. And yeah, it works well. Like, he doesn't get lost in the sauce. He basically kind of stays in his lane. The only difficulty that you have with that flute solo, though, is it's a flute solo, and recording a jazz flute is not as easy as like recording a jazz trumpet and a sax. So there's that. Then you get Mr. Oliver Nelson himself coming in on that tenor sax solo. And yeah, this is where the track kind of peaks up on the solo aspect for me. Like, he goes for more of that minimal vibey style. And the way that he's just able to dig in on such simple tones is so thoughtful and so just enjoyable to hear. And it's really just pleasant to the ear. The way that it's recorded is just so pronounced. And yeah, I can't get enough of it, man. And just the way that, again, like, he really didn't, like, step out of his bounds and really start doing, like, licks or anything like that. He just mainly kind of just really sunk his teeth into, like, the pie that was being, like, made by the rhythm section, and he was really, really just providing just an excellent experience for me. Finishing off the solos, you get Bill Evans coming in, as you illustrated, and yeah, I felt like his solo was a great counterpart to Oliver's, because, like, with Oliver Nelson, you get the vibey kind of, like, total kind of, like, solo. And then with Bill Evans, you get him, like, more doing runs and, like, just really just running up and down that keyboard there, the piano as a whole. And yeah, it works pretty well for me. I very much enjoyed it. And also want to give a shout out to the backing band throughout the solos. The bass work from Paul fucking Chambers and the drumming from Roy Haynes, like, phenomenal, dude. And I didn't really pick up on the Barry sax work as much as you did, and that's saying something, because I feel like I insulted my people by saying that statement there, but it is what it is. And the only other note I have about solo moments from a song discussion standpoint is the way that the band comes back in to reestablish that melody was pretty good, because you get the crescendo and decrescendo alongside of, like, a pretty interesting use of the drum roll there. So yeah, overall with solo moments, it's not in my top 3 because I have my complaints about it. And I love experiences like this where I kind of figured that Stolen Moments was going to be the big track off the record, and I was kind of curious about my thoughts about it. And like, yeah, I mean, it's if I had to put it in a song bucket, I would put it. It's kind of hard because I did enjoy Freddie's solo, so that makes me want to put in the meh song bucket. But that almost seems like an insult to Eric and Oliver and even Bill in the backing band. So I'm going to invent a new song bucket here on Hey Listen to This. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I'm going to put this song in the mixed song bucket. Like, I just don't know what to feel about it.
You know what? I respect that. I respect that. The way you were talking about it, I thought you were almost going to create the hard song bucket, but that would just kind of be weird. But yeah, I'm a little. I do respect your opinion, and I understand where you're coming from, particularly with Freddie's solo being as out there as it is, and not really creating an established environment or clashing so much with the environment that the chorus established. I obviously didn't see it that way, but I understand you coming from that. I also agree recording jazz flute is difficult, so the fact they were able to get as much, because again, I will say, as good as Eric Dolphy sounds on the flute, it does come off a little softer, a little more buried in the mix, but that's just limitations of recording. You can only do so much. But yeah, aside from that, I think we're somewhat in agreement on everything else. Bill Evans sounds good, Oliver Nelson sounds good, backing band sounds really good. So yeah, we'll just agree to disagree on this one. And we'll move on to the next track off of The Blues and the Abstract Truth, and that is Hoe-down. Ryan, floor is yours.
Oh man, I'm ready. I'm ready for this Hoe-down here. So, at the start of Hoe-down, you get that vocal shout out of I didn't look up proper what's actually being said. I'm sure you're gonna be able to fill in the gaps in your dissection, but I only hear Hoe-down, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready. Let's go. And after that, you get the horns doing that melodic lick that really gets you settled in for the track as a whole, and it's really just an enjoyable time on my part. And after that lick is established and you get really kind of into the track, you get a build that feels a bit chaotic, but you know me, I very much enjoy chaos within my music. So the chaotic build was a lot of fun for me at the same time. So yeah, we're starting out with a fun melodic lick, and then you get some chaos and just a lot of tension. And then you get into the solos with Hoe-down. And the first solo, once again, goes to Freddie here on trumpet. And unlike with Stolen Moments, I feel like in Hoe-down, he does do a solid job within his solo. I just enjoy how, instead of going for a mixture of minimal vibey kind of solo, which would not have fit so much in a song like this, let's be honest with you. He goes for a balance of skill, established melody, and really just sticking in that pocket. So very much enjoyed what what he was doing there. Eric Dolphy's up next on the solo front on alto sax this time instead of flute, and his solo's pretty great. I really enjoyed the spots where he just does scale runs up and down, they land so well. And also the moments where he hits those high notes, oh man, it basically brings me back to my college days, and just really just blasting on high notes and just having a good time. And also there was moments within his solo, dude, that I felt like he was just glitching out, and my brain was starting to I don't want to say fracture, but it was just oh, okay, yeah, I get down with your bad self, man. The next solo after that goes to Mr. Oliver Nelson himself on tenor sax, and Yeah, his solo, I'm gonna be a little honest with you, it was a bit of a grind to get to, because out of from the start, I illustrated with Freddie solo that he wasn't really going for a minimal kind of vibe. Oliver, he seemed like, I don't want to say he was going for a minimal kind of vibe, but it seemed like he was behind the backing band. Like he was out of touch. He was just he was he was dragging the band back. To quote J.K. Simmons in the movie Whiplash, highly recommend seeing that movie. Fantastic movie. It gives me PTSD from my music school days. Anyways, I digress. But yeah, after he does eventually get in the pockets of the rhythm, the backing band is laying down for him. Like he does eventually start to really land into some sweet spots for me. Like I noted that I enjoyed where he was revving up through scales and just hitting high notes. Again, just sounded so well for me. And yeah, just the only other thing I got to say about Hoe-down as a whole on a compositional front and a note taking front is that the drum fills at the end of the solos, like after all the solos were done, you get that little bit of a drum fill. I don't want to call it a drum solo as a whole from Roy here, but it was pretty solid as a whole. So I know I had my complaints about Oliver Nelson and how he couldn't start on time, and he was just lagging out of bed, a drunk man getting out of a bar trying to search for his keys. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not an endorsement for drunk driving. Be smart. Call an Uber. Make good decisions in your life. But I'm gonna be honest with you. I did enjoy what was going on here with Hoe-down as a whole outside of that moment. So we've entered into a top 3 territory with Hoe-down for me, and Hoe-down is not my favorite track off the album. It's not my second favorite track, so by process of elimination, we have landed on my third favorite track off the whole record.
Very nice, very nice. I mean, let's spoil a little bit of camaraderie here. There are only 6 tracks on this album, so it's not going to take us super long to get to our top 3s, because 3 is in fact half of 6, so math. But my thoughts on Hoe-down. First of all, I'll just give you the whole words from what I've heard on the vocal, which is Hoe-down, a 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the entire lyrics of this album right there. So it's pretty cut and dry as to what's being said there. So no mystery, no need to play your record backwards, nothing like that. And apparently this piece, from what I've read, was inspired by the musical composer Aaron Copland and his piece Rodeo. Which I could very easily believe that, because the call response in the chorus does have a very strong country and western flavor. Not like Florida Georgia Line or Garth Brooks, but very much a, hey, we're actually at a rodeo, we're actually at the state fair, and we are embracing our traditions type of vibe. In a jazz context, obviously. It's not full on yeehaw, stomp your feet, because you really don't have a violin, you don't have a steel guitar, of any guitar actually. You just have woodwinds, bass, piano, and drums, so therefore jazz. But the jazz you get on this track is really good. Because not only do you have the inverse within the chorus where it stops being call response and everyone just sort of jams out for a few bars before it gets back to the call and response, that's just hardcore jazz right there. And then you get to the solos where, Freddie Hubbard has a nice solo here too. It's not quite as much of a statement, at least in my opinion, as it was in Stolen Moments, but it fits right in with the track nicely. It doesn't really meander too far off from the flow or the vibe of the whole track. And then you get to Dolphy, where you're right, Ryan. He very much is sort of shot out of a cannon on this one, and it will not be the last time. He is just sort of running up and down the scale and showcasing his chops. He is very much just sort of going with the flyby nature of this piece, which again is rooted and driven by Paul Chambers and Roy Haynes. We will come back to Roy Haynes. As far as Oliver Nelson, I understand exactly where you're coming from with that solo, because for the first couple bars, it feels like he's just sort of following the melody, and then he goes back into smooth, suave, slow mode, like he's trying to take the solo from Stolen Moments and like pigeonhole it into Hoe-down before he finally starts getting into the groove. So yeah, that was a bit of a weird point, but I didn't hate it. It felt very just sort of play what I feel and see what happens next. And is it as strong as it was on Stolen Moments? No. But does it sound bad? Also no. It sounds fine. But yeah, Roy Haynes, man, he is the star of this track, I think, through and through. And not just because he gets that solo at the end, where he does just sort of do that very snare-heavy, drum roll influence type of maintenance, I should say, of the beat. But even throughout the track, he is just whipping and dipping and flipping and just making sure that not only does this track stay focused and on beat, but just has that just sort of vivacious, very celebratory energy that I think Oliver Nelson was going for throughout. And it's just a fun track, man. Like, it is just a fun track to listen to. Like, after the sort of mellow moodiness of Stolen Moments, this is a really nice contrast and a strong way to sort of present both sides of the coin from Oliver Nelson's mindset. So yeah, we're entering right back in the top 3 territory with me as well. And Hoe-down just falls right in line. It is my second favorite song off the whole album.
I am so glad that, again, there was a lot of, there was a high probability that our top 3 was going to intersect here. And so, yeah, I don't really have anything else to add about your thoughts on Hoe-down. I'm glad that you enjoyed it, up to the point that I did, if not even maybe just a little bit more. Obviously, with that being the case, that it's your second favorite track off the whole record, and it's my third. But, I feel like it is time for us to progress into the closing track off of side A on this record and this review with the track Cascades. Matthew, the floor is yours.
The floor is mine. I will start by once again turning to the liner notes and giving the floor to Oliver Nelson's words, where he says about Cascades, and I quote, "Cascades started out as a saxophone exercise I composed while in school. As it turned out, 32 bars were molded into 56 bars to accommodate all the things that seemed to lend themselves naturally for further musical expansion. After the complete statement of melody, Cascades becomes a vehicle for Freddie Hubbard and pianist Bill Evans. Freddie begins his solo with long melodic lines that weave in and out of the harmonic progressions. He sounds to me like John Coltrane playing a trumpet. Bill begins his piano solo quietly and gradually builds his lines in intensity and structure. At the conclusion of his last chorus, Bill leads the 4 horns into the ensemble out chorus. The out chorus is different from the melodic line present in the beginning of the piece. It is 12 bars in length and is borrowed harmonically from Stolen Moments. Again, the melodic ideas have determined the size and shape of this composition," unquote. So, I'm glad he said that, because if he wasn't going to say it, I will. This piece seems very heavily influenced by the works of John Coltrane. And I was able to tell that immediately, just from the vibe that we get from the start. Not only do you get what I thought was a great move in having Roy Haynes lead off the track, sort of maintaining the momentum from Hoe-down, but then you get into that just opening sax bar that Nelson is laying down. And Nelson really doesn't have a solo per se, because the chorus is more or less his solo, for lack of a better term, even though he's not soloing in jest. He's just very out there, just taking the lead on it. And again, it sounds very much akin to something that John Coltrane would have released around the time of Giant Steps. So yeah, that's good. And then you get Freddie Hubbard, who, once again, doesn't really stand out as far as what he's playing. Like, he's got a very good thing going on. And there are a couple moments where he sort of experiments with that little flutter where he just kind of has that one riff that he just plays a few times over and over. And I did notice that, and it was kind of, I understand some people might be turned off by that, where it's just like, okay, we get you could do that trick, now move on to something else. But for the sake of it being a one-taker, and again, the fact they could have done this 9,000 times, this is the take they went with, I'm willing to give both Hubbard and Nelson the benefit of the doubt on that one. So yeah, Hubbard's solo is good, and then the solo for Bill Evans, once again, is just superb. He is, once again, just holding everything in and mastering the piano as he usually does. But what Nelson mentioned and what I picked up on listening to this track is that it is very interesting. Like, this feels more like a true composition than a traditional jazz standard type. Like with Hoe-down or Stolen Moments, you get chorus, chorus, solos, chorus. Cascades, you get opening melody, solos, and then something completely different in the outro, where you have the horns doing this more big band jump type of outro where they're just playing a line together. I had not realized that it was harmonically similar to Stolen Moments, but I just kind of realized, hey, we're going from combo to big band on a combo track, and I think that's relatively interesting because you're breaking from the mold that you have set and will return to in future songs on this album. So yeah, Cascades, honestly, again, it sounds very good, and it's one of those tracks where if you're not paying attention, it sounds great. If you are paying attention, it sounds great, but there's not really a whole lot of delineation between not paying attention and paying attention, because it just sounds good no matter how you devolve it. So with that being said, I'm going to throw Cascades into the great song bucket for this album.
And for me, my thoughts and feelings about Cascades here. The start to this song, like you talked about, for me, it was a bit of a bait and switch, a bit intense, and I was here for it, 100%. Like, the way that I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, we're just gonna go right into the solo from Oliver Nelson. Cool, and then the other horns come right into like clash with Oliver Nelson and create like they're doing their own melodic lines, and the way that the other horns and Oliver are just grinding up against each other, pure bliss for my ear holes, man. So I absolutely love that wholeheartedly. 10 out of 10, no notes. Getting into the solos, the solo from Freddie was pretty solid. Yeah, I'm just curious to see. I feel like Freddie as a whole, with his trumpet playing here, like, outside of the first track, Stolen Moments, like, a lot of his solos are basically, like, yeah, he basically kind of does stick in the pocket, and he does have some nice splashes here or there. And that might speak more to my appreciation about Freddie Hubbard as a whole, or the fact that I'm a sax player, I'm not a trumpet player, so I might not dig, like, what Freddie is doing with his solos, but it is what it is. I am who I am. I'm pretty comfortable in my own skin and my own opinions. But yeah, moving outside of Freddie's solo, the solo from Bill Evans was pretty solid. Like, I enjoyed the moments that he was doing where he was just doing, like, just melodic runs up and down the keys. Did get a little bit lost at certain spots for me. Like, I feel like he was losing the pocket, the feeling of the song as a whole, but he was able to pull himself out of it. Overall, like, it wasn't anything that really sunk the track's appeal at all for me, honestly. And another moment that I did enjoy within Bill's solo was he had little moments of just repeating, like, starting lines. Like, he kept going back to, like, the start of the scale, start of the scale, start of the scale. And I thought that was pretty cool. The backing band, once again, as a whole, does deserve a wholehearted shout out. Paul Chambers and Roy Haynes, are doing the Lord's work, and they're doing a great job keeping the beat as a whole. So, shout out to those two gentlemen. They are deserving of their flowers. So, yeah, it was interesting for me to really come up with a top 3 for this review here. And honestly, I didn't have to come up with the top 3. For those of you who are kind of curious to hear what it sounds like when I don't have a top 3 within a review, check out our Wiz Khalifa episode. That was an interesting episode for us to do together. But yeah, with Cascades here, it does land in my top 3. And after much introspection, due to the pure bliss that I just enjoyed at the start here, with the chaotic, dissonant, melodic lines between Oliver Nelson and the other horns. Yeah, dude, I'm not gonna lie, it's my favorite track off the whole record.
And I respect that, man, because I will say there were a couple of moments throughout the repeated listens of this album where my top 2 were pretty set in stone, but my third spot could have really gone to anybody, and I'll explain why one track coming up does do that. But yeah, no, I can understand you getting that, because again, as a sax player, this is very Coltrane coded, and after 2 songs of one being a little bit of a slow burn and the other being just a wild party, this feels like the strong, jazzy middle between the two, where it just feels like, okay, this is jazz, this is what I come to listen to, and this just sounds really good. And it does. It sounds great. So I'm very happy that it is in your top 3.
With that being said, Matthew, before we kick it into the back half of the review, because I'm yearning to talk about Yearning here, with the next track being Yearning. But before we do such things, I have a question for you.
Oh, okay. And what is that question?
If the dear listener out there right now is just really enjoying what we are bringing to the table here with our discussion of the blues and the abstract by Oliver Nelson, and they want to help support what we do on a week in, week out basis, that way we keep pumping out these episodes as I laid out, what are some ways that they can help show some support? And also other ways that they can connect with us on different platforms. And if they're really feeling like the Son of Man, if they really want to get episode requests of us covering a Phil Collins album, what is a way that they could do such things as well, man?
I was wondering when he was going to show up. Good old Phil Collins never fails. Unless you want us to talk about when he did. So, the first thing to talk about is how you can listen to this. And the way you can do that is by finding us on your favorite podcasting platform of choice. Because we're pretty much anywhere where podcasts are. We are on Spotify, we are on Apple Podcasts, we are on Pocket Cast, and we are on YouTube as well. And we upload our episodes weekly to those sites. So check us out if you want to listen to, hey, listen to this. And if you're liking what you're hearing, whether we're talking about the likes of Oliver Nelson, or Purple, or the Beach Boys, or the Beatles, or Toledo, leave us that comment, or leave us that 5-star rating. Give us that subscription if you're on YouTube. Like the video. And do whatever it does to please the algorithmic gods that won't land you behind bars. But let's say you're listening to an episode and you're thinking to yourself, okay, I like what they're talking about here, and I know there's somebody out there who is going to like what they're talking about, but I'm not sure who that is. So I'm just going to cast this net out onto the net and hope that it catches somebody in. We got good news for you there too. We also are part of that net because we are on social media. We are on Blue Sky. We are on Threads. We are on Facebook. We are on Instagram. And if you're looking for us on any of those sites, you can find us by just typing our name in. Hey, listen to this. You can find us with the black microphone amidst the blue background, or the shortcut to do that is to use our username, which is ttheylisten. Again, that is ttheylisten. And that is how you can find us on social media. And speaking of ttheylisten, if you want to reach out to us directly to request that Phil Collins album, but you do not know us directly, fear not, for there is an email address that you can find us at, and that is ttheylisten@gmail.com. Again, that is ttheylisten@gmail.com. If you want to request a album of our choosing, which if you decide to go against the grain and request Peter Gabriel, I will love you forever. But whatever album it is, or if you want to give us feedback on the album we are talking about, whether it be positive or critical, you could do that as well. So again, to recap, ttheylisten@gmail.com is how you can reach us. You can also find us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. And you can listen to our shows every week by tuning in on places such as YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Pocket Cast. And as always, for those of you who've done that throughout our first 120 plus full reviews of music here on Hey Listen to This, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Again, we are just two dudes who like to talk about music. We're not part of any major podcast network. We're not here to sell you any OH7 or magical fish that talk whenever you push a button. No, we're just two dudes who like to talk about music. And from one dude to another, Ryan, thank you as always for being a wonderful co-host. Again, I tend to go on some weird tangents sometimes, but sometimes that's just part of the discussion. And thank you for keeping me grounded and focused on the road ahead, man.
And the compliment goes right back to you, man. And give yourself some grace. Like, I definitely go on weird tangents as a whole. It's part of my personality at times, and yeah, it's just it definitely shows that we for sure make a good podcasting pair here. And yeah, ultimately, like, win, lose, or draw with this project here, and like just the experience as a whole, I absolutely love the opportunity to sit down with you and just talk about music for just like, at most probably like 2 to 2.5 hours, depending on our recording length, and just really just dive into records, because like I say every week, the year of our Lord 2026, to quote Eric Andre, every time you open up the news, it's like sulfuric acid to your eyes, and it makes you want to throw your phone across the room. So why not take the opportunity to step away from that and just enjoy something that, brings you clarity, brings you peace, and just something that you enjoy that doesn't takes away from the pains of the world. But that being said, that was that. I'm also always appreciative of the listeners out there, but in order for them to keep listening to Hey Listen to This, I feel like it is time for us to kick it into the back half of this review of A Blues in the Abstract by Oliver Nelson by talking about the next track, which is Yearning. So with Yearning here, the way that the song starts out, it's pretty solid. You get Bill Evans doing that intro, and I enjoyed how, like, with that intro, like, it leads into the horns just coming in and doing, like, the that melodic lines that basically kind of, like, sets the scene for the song. And that horn part that you hear right before the first solo was super solid. I just, the only way I was able to describe that part is you get the horns spazzing out, but always landing on a downbeat. Like, it was just a very pleasant thing for the ears for me. The first solo here, you get basically 3 solos here in total. Went to Eric Dolphy on alto sax, and it's good. You get highlights of like high notes, and squawks, and just essentially like scaling down within solo, just running cascading effects, and I found them to be pretty good. The next solo goes to Mr. Freddie Hubbard himself. Solid melody come from him in his solo. You get high notes that are hit in a notable section, and you get Bill Evans doing like trills underneath, and I found that to be pretty entertaining as a whole. And yeah, just one thing that I do want to note about Bill Evans within this track here, it was just I might have just been in just imagining stuff, but it felt like whenever you get moments of space, whether it's from Eric Dolphy or Freddie Hubbard doing the lead on the solos, it almost seemed like Bill was filling in the gaps and adding little licks here or there, and that just shows off his ability as a pianist and as a jazz player as a whole. But yeah, very solid, very much appreciated that. And yeah, the final solo comes from Bill Evans himself. Yeah, his solo was pretty solid overall, but no notable spots. It was basically what we've heard so far in the record. So yeah, with Yearning, not my second favorite track off the record, but I guess I'm gonna put it in the good song bucket because I really have no notes of negativity coming out of Yearning. Just the other 3 songs were more notable, obviously. So yeah, what's your thoughts about Yearning?
My thoughts about Yearning, well, I'll start with the way this song begins, because you do get that really nice beginning from Bill Evans on piano, and just sort of eases us into side 2 before it gets into the main chorus, which Nelson describes as a blues in C major with only superficial modifications. Pianist Bill Evans begins with 2 choruses of blues which set the mood of the piece. The first ensemble is 16 measures long. The second ensemble, 12 measures in length, employs a kind of amen cadence that is different from the liturgical one in that it is stationary and does not move when the harmonic progression is resolved. And I'm glad he said it that way, because my thought is he just fit as many hooks and calls and responses he could into the first 2 minutes of the song. I've heard 5 different choruses going on, and I respect the hell out of that, man. It just creates this wild musical journey where, again, much like Stolen Moments, you expect a very simple blues, you expect a very simple structure, but it feels like he's fusing structures together to the point where it almost feels like you're going on a progressive journey from one piece to another piece to one subsection to another subsection, and it almost feels like a more organized, very deliberate composition before it goes into the solo. So it feels like it's its own classical piece on its own, and the unconventionality of the chord structure helps make that piece unique, because it's not the simple blues chords. Again, you get to the amen chords where it feels like the chords don't shift in a traditional sense, and that, again, it just creates more fun for the journey. Speaking of unconventional, Eric Dolphy, ladies and gentlemen, this dude, here is Oliver Nelson trying to create this nice pastiche of fusion between jazz and classical, and here's Eric Dolphy saying, "Look what my saxophone can do when I play it." Because he is just going all over the place in his solo. Again, like you mentioned, with the high notes, the runs, the squawks. He is just shredding for the sake of shredding. And I know a lot of people may listen to that and be like, okay, he's just showing off his chops. He's not playing along with the melody. Again, these are professional musicians who recorded this in a professional studio with a professional time limit, a professional contract. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to assume that they listened to Dolphy's solo being as wild as it was like, you know what? Hell yeah. I'm for this. And much like them, I am for it too. Then you get the solo from Freddie Hubbard, which I'm kind of in agreement with you. It's pretty good. It definitely is his most chill solo of the album so far. Unlike Dolphy, and probably because he's paired right next to Dolphy, Hubbard comes across very mellow, very in with the melody, which doesn't sound bad at all. It sounds very, very strong. And then you get Bill Evans, once again, not just filling in the gaps like you said, but when he gets to his own solo, he is just showing the best of both worlds between staying in line with the melody and flashing some chops of his own before it gets to that final echo of the start of the piece, where again it goes from what you think is going to happen to what actually happens in its compositional style. So yeah, it was tough between the 4 remaining tracks to see which one would be my third favorite, but we have arrived at my third favorite track on the album with Yearnin, just because again of the complexity of the full band effort that starts in this track. I really appreciate that, man.
And I can respect that. I feel like Yearning was definitely one of the tracks off the record that I could have made a justifiable argument for it landing in my third favorite track spot. But realistically, I did have that minor complaint about Hoe-down as a whole. But I had to be honest with myself. I had to take a look at the 3 tracks off the record that in post-review, when I would go back to the album, these are the tracks that I enjoyed the most as a whole, which, I mean, kind of makes the most sense. But, like, I feel like with Yearning, Catch Me on a Different Day, it may pop into a top 3 spot, but as it stands right now, it's in the good song bucket, man. It's not in the hard song bucket. It's in the good song bucket.
Yeah. I'm curious as to if the hard song bucket is just going to be a figment of our imagination, or perhaps the friends we made along the way, or if somehow hard song bucket does make an official appearance one of these days in our episodes.
With that being said, Matthew, are you ready to kick it into the penultimate track off the record of The Blues in the Abstract by Oliver Nelson, with this track being called Butch and Butch?
Yes, Butch and Butch, which according to Hubbard is dedicated to his oldest sister and her husband. So interesting little side note there, again, right from the liner notes. And he also describes it as being a blues throughout with no structural changes, which, yeah, he's not wrong about that. This is a very standard blues type of song. And it's a very nice listen, though, because that chorus with the horns in sync, like, me and Ryan were once in a jazz band together at Geneva College, so we have experiences with songs like this where it's very saxophone heavy and very saxophone ensemble heavy. Like, this is meant to be a jump track featuring a lot of saxophone action, and that's exactly what it is. And the saxophone section of George Barrow, Eric Dolphy, and Oliver Nelson just sounds so good together in tandem on that chorus. And again, the vibes it brought back were just immaculate. We're just like, oh yeah, I remember songs like this. I very much dig that. And then after that, you get the solos from the likes of Eric Dolphy and Freddie Hubbard. And the way these guys sound on here, it's fine. I thought Dolphy's solo was a bit more strained than it was on Yearnin. I thought Freddie Hubbard was very much in line with how he did on Yearnin. And overall, you get to the concluding solo by Bill Evans. Like, it sounds fine too, but really what makes this track work again is that saxophone stuff, where Barrow, Dolphy, and Nelson are just in step with one another. And as Nelson describes himself, after a brief introduction by the wonderful Roy Haynes, Eric and Freddie played the bop-like line and are joined by George Barrow on baritone saxophone and myself on tenor for the second statement of melody. This leads to the blowing choruses by myself, followed by Freddie, Eric, and pianist Bill Evans. It's very much a strong blues track. It has a lot of great saxophone work. But if I'm being completely honest, this is probably the one track on the album where I probably have the least to say. Not that it's a bad track by any means. I'm throwing it right in the good song bucket just because it sounds very good and the solos are strong and the sax work is strong. But it's very much a track that knows where it's at, it stays where it's at. So, good song.
And for me, with Butch and Butch here, I'm glad that you did do the little, intro, essentially setting up the scene of what the song was, written about or written for, because that's a fun little detail there. But, yeah, the start to this track was a ton of fun. The horn licks are pretty solid, and for the first time within the album as a whole, I heard the Call of My People, the Barry sax. I heard some nice swells there, so that spoke well for me. And also, the one detail that I absolutely loved about Butch and Butch was the fact that you hear slight skips in the track, and you know me, and the dear listeners out there know me. When this track came on and I heard the slight skips, oh my god, that was that was straight bliss for my ear hole. So I couldn't get enough of that. The solo from Oliver Nelson as a whole, the first solo here was there's some nice moments, but yeah, again, you get Oliver kind of struggling to keep on the beat. I know jazz is all relative and you can do whatever you want, but still I couldn't help to not notice that he was struggling to keep up with the rhythm section. But it wasn't so much that it sucks the track's appeal as a whole. Freddie has the next solo, as you illustrated, and he does do a much better job at staying on the beat, and he does do a decent job developing a melodic line. So yeah, shout out to him for that. Dolphy's up next on alto sax, and I love how the solo starts out. It's so wild. And it's almost there are moments where you get two lines competing against each other. It's he's going high and low, high and low, high and low. Not high then low, you get the sort of da 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 da. That was so good. I very much appreciated that. And then Bill Evans with the final solo on the track. He did do a solid job, but it's a little noteworthy, a little short, but it's still solid as a whole. Not really to write much home about, but I had to be honest with myself. Whenever I heard those slight skips in the track, and with Eric Dolphy doing his solo as a whole, I had to put this in a top track contention. And for those of you who are following along at home, you've noticed that there's only one spot left in my top three, and that is my second favorite track. So Butch and Butch is my second favorite track off the record as a result.
And I respect that once again. I can't say I'm really surprised by that because, again, you are a sax guy, and this is a sax song, if there ever was one. Again, it very much reminds me of some of the songs that you guys did. Indiana was one of those songs I remember from back in the jazz band days where everybody got in the act, and the ones where the entire section would stand up and play. That's kind of what this song felt like to me. So that's the kind of warm feeling I got about it. But again, that's really the highlight of it. The solos didn't super stand out to me, but this is another one of those tracks where Catch Me on a Different Day, it could knock out Yearnin for being in that 3 spot. It could possibly, I don't think it's going to creep up as high as Hoe-down, but that's just my personal preference. But Yeah, I very much respect you respecting this song enough to have in your top three. So, that being said, Ryan, I am, if you are ready to close this out, with the final track off the Blues and the Abstract Truth, which is Teenie's Blues.
So with Teenie's Blues here, the start to the track was pretty good. I very much enjoyed the walking bass from Paul Chambers and the horn licks that come in afterwards. It was just like a really great way to start off the track as a whole. And Eric Dolphy comes up first with the solos, alto sax this time, and overall pretty good. The spots that I highlighted though, where it seems like again you get the glitchy out like effect that you get there for a second, and also towards the back half of the solo you get the moments when he's running the scales pretty crazy fast. So yeah, enjoyed that. Mr. Nelson's up next on tenor sax, and his solo was pretty solid. Spots that I highlighted where he starts repeating the same lines, but you get the feeling of like growing intensity with his solo in those lines, and the high note hits that you get and the falls that occur after that in the solo were pretty noteworthy, pretty enjoyable as a whole. Bill Evans is up next with his solo. Pretty good solo. Some decent moments, but honestly nothing noteworthy. Like he's doing his Bill Evans stuff. Like again, it's not bad, but there's nothing really I can gravitate towards. Again, this might be a case of familiarity with the instrument, where like if I was a pianist, I would be like, you know what? Yeah, really enjoying what's going on here because like I've seen how the sausage is made, and this is how the sausage is made. And the last solo on the track does belong to Mr. Paul Chambers, which when I heard that, I was just like, oh, okay. It's about time that he gets some recognition, put some respect on his name. But I hate to say this, dude. That solo kind of came off a bit awkward to me. Like, again, it's kind of hard to do, like, in a very efficient, like upright bass solo in a jazz combo setting like this. Like I felt like he was struggling to keep on the beat that Roy Haynes was laying down. But yeah, I don't have a bottom track by any means within this record, and there was at least enough decent moments within Teenie's Blues that I was just like, you know what? Yeah, it's still like kind of a mixed bag, but I feel like with Teenie's Blues, I'm not putting in the mix song bucket. I'm putting in the good song bucket as a whole. Like I don't hate the song. There's some good moments, just kind of wish that there was a little bit more coming from Paul Chambers and his solo.
So, funny enough, I'm kind of in the same category with you, feeling like somewhere between good and mixed and appreciating certain moments on this song. But I feel like the moments I have problems with and the moments that I appreciate are a little different. I'll sort of start backwards from where you left off. I thought Paul Chambers' bass solo was alright. Like, it definitely wasn't super standoutish, like, especially for all the work he's done on this album. He and Roy Haynes have been the workhorses all along, keeping things steady and consistent. And those two deserve, as I've said, and as you've said, their flowers for what they've done. I didn't hate his solo by any means. If anything, I have the same issue with it that I had with Eric Dolphy's solo from Stolen Moments, where it felt like it kind of got buried in the mix and probably could have been pushed out a little bit more. But aside from that, there was nothing offensive note-wise about the solo. And Nelson's solo definitely feels considerably more relaxed than Dolphy's. Dolphy's solo, man, like, just like Yearnin, it is the musical equivalent of letting your dog out into the yard and just letting him run crazy. That's what Dolphy's solo sounds like to me, where it's just like he is going up and down the scale and not giving a single damn about what is going on. My biggest issue with Teenie's Blues, and honestly, this is an issue that almost dragged this into bottom track territory for me, is ironically enough the chorus, because I don't know if you picked up on it. As I've said throughout this album, anytime there are some issues with the way things sound, I tend to give the musicians the benefit of the doubt because they could have tried another take, but they decided this is one they went with. I'm going to read one more time verbatim from the liner notes from Oliver Nelson himself. The purpose of this tune was to write a blues using traditional harmony employing no more than 3 harmonic progressions. Since the dominant 7th is considered by theorists to be one of the so-called blue notes, I limited the underlying harmony to consist of these 3 tonal centers, F7, B-flat, 7, and C7. The melodic line Eric Dolphy and I play on alto saxophone is made up of displaced intervals which have points of tension and rest. They are transposed up a half step for the sake of tension and down a half step for resolution of this tension. And that is where I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, because if he had not said that, if he had not made it known that this song deliberately was meant to be tension, I would have almost accused him of playing wrong notes. Like, that's how those notes on the chorus sound to me. Like, it is walking that tightrope between jazziness and wrongness. Like, and it is just like dancing on it on its toenails. Like, it is getting into dangerous territory. But that complaint aside, the solos were good. Bill Evans was good. Chambers solo was nice. And I'm not going to dig the track for an intentional point where they decide to really test the waters. I respect that, and even though I didn't appreciate it, I'd still kind of cringe every time I hear some of those notes. Again, that was the intended focus of it, so they were just getting experimental, and I have nothing against that. Also, one final note about Teenie's Blues. Much like Butch and Butch was dedicated to his oldest sister and her husband, Teenie's Blues dedicated to his baby sister, who was living in Missouri at the time that this album was recorded. So that's a nice little note. But for me, I'm putting Teenie's Blues in the good song bucket. Because again, enough of it is good that I'm willing to give the experimental stuff a pass.
Fair enough, man. Fair enough. And I very much appreciated your reading of the liner notes. Definitely adds like a nice little like texture element to the album's picture as a whole. But the dear listener out there might notice that that picture is complete. We've framed the picture. We put it on the wall. We had 6 tracks up for this review. 6 tracks have been smacked down. Scorecards have been filled out. So there's only one thing left to say about this review.
We did it, man.
We did indeed do it. We went up to Oliver Nelson and we were like, hey, tell us the story about your life. And he's just like, you know what, cats? It starts with a little thing called the blues, and then we get a little bit abstract. So I'm gonna let you go first for your overall thoughts and feelings and ratings for this album here.
All right, so my thoughts on the blues and the abstract truth as a whole. This album to me is definitely a must listen for anyone who wants to listen to jazz. Like, this is not in the same realm as the spontaneity of Kind of Blue or the hard bop of Giant Steps or the experimentation of A Bitch's Brew or something along the lines of Weather Report, or even, getting into older stuff like Benny Goodman or Woody Herman. This is very much in line with that early 60s sound, but even going away from the specifics of it, if someone were to say, hey, what does jazz sound like? I would definitely consider giving them an album like this, because there are moments on here where, especially with the likes of Butch and Butch, Yearnin, I'll throw Cascades in there, and definitely Stolen Moments, where you get the essence of what cool combo jazz is supposed to sound like. Now, on the other side, with the likes of Yearnin, Teenie's Blues, and Hoe-down, you get more of a compositional feel where Nelson is exploring how to broaden his horizons musically and broaden the sound of jazz as a whole, which does usually have good results. Occasionally it leaves you a little confused, like with Teenie's Blues. But yeah, overall, the playing on this album, the rhythm section is about as consistent and as strong as you could ever imagine, with the likes of Bill Evans, Paul Chambers, and Roy Haynes just absolutely laying things down. Eric Dolphy, his solos run from wild to crazy and everything in between. Oliver Nelson's the leader, you could tell. Freddie Hubbard, he goes from being militant to relaxed to back again. And even George Barrow, he doesn't appear a lot of this album, but when he does, it sounds great. So I can't go and give this album a full 10 out of 10 because there were moments of stagnation, and those notes on Teenie's Blues left me a little cringy. But overall, man, this is an album for jazz listeners throughout, beginners, lifers, and everyone in between. So I'm going to give The Blues and the Abstract Truth by Oliver Nelson a 9 out of 10.
And for me, my opinions about The Blues and the Abstract by Oliver Nelson, very excited to go into this review because, like I said at the start, always looking to add to my jazz album collection. And, you know, familiar with the names like Paul Chambers and Bill Evans and Eric Dolphy and Freddie Hubbard. Like, I already illustrated, don't need to rehash that. I did enjoy tracks of, like, a good majority of the tracks. I didn't have a single bottom track within this record here. Tracks like Hoe-down, Butch and Butch, and Cascades, like, you know, are going to be my favorites because there's moments within those songs that really speak to me, and they stand out for one reason or another. The ultimate thing that kind of holds this album back from being a album that I would throw into my good jazz album collection, though, is the fact that there's multiple sections. I know it's kind of hard. I don't need to be a stickler. And Ryan, it's jazz, and, like, you know, you need to lay off. But I have my opinions, goddammit. I'm allowed to have them here. This is America, man. But yeah, there's just several moments where, like, I don't know if this is just me being picky or developing my ear for music as a whole, but there's moments, like, throughout this album where the solos can be a little bit sloppy in execution. And also, there's moments that just don't land for me. Like, the big song off the record is Stolen Moments, and that's supposed to be, like, the grand statement. And I just walk away from it feeling, you know what? That was good. Like, I wasn't blown away. So, and I guess it kind of speaks to, like, my overall, like, you know, thoughts about the record as a whole. Because, like, while, like, you know, there was moments within Cascades and Butch and Butch where, like, they do execute elements where I really do appreciate it. Like, there's stuff within this album that kind of just drags down the experience as a whole. So I feel like with an overall rating, it's kind of hard for me. I think I'm going to stick with my original rating because it's just my opinion after all my experience. So I'm going to give The Blues in the Abstract by Oliver Nelson a 6 out of 10.
Wow. Okay. All right. I was not expecting that deep of a official disagreement, for lack of a better term. And it feels weird because it feels like we didn't do a whole lot of disagreeing on this episode. Like, we weren't, like, at each other's throats like we were in the Cars episode. You can check that out if you want to know what I'm talking about. But yeah, like, that's a little surprising. But okay. Math is math, and with your 6 and my 9, we average out to a 7.5 out of 10 because
Math
works for everyone. It does not discriminate. It's just numbers, and that is that. So my next album recommendation, I could have gone any number of directions with this. I could have gone with Miles. I could have gone with Coltrane. But instead I'm going to go with an album from one of the musicians on this record. And it would have been the album we would have talked about had you chosen the other way last week, Ryan. And that album is Out to Lunch by Eric Dolphy. And Much like the Blues and the Abstract Truth, Out to Lunch is very much a combo setting for jazz. Unlike this album, it is a lot more experimental and a lot more freeform than Oliver Nelson's works. Like, Oliver Nelson was very much rooted in the blues and somewhat traditional music and trying to fuse them together. Eric Dolphy basically makes Out to Lunch the, hey, look what your instrument could do, the album. And so if you're into that kind of freeform jazz, I would recommend Out to Lunch by Eric Dolphy based on this one.
And for me, I hate to take the basic route, the most basic of all routes, but you know what? I didn't want to overthink it, so I'm just gonna go there. I'm just gonna recommend "Kinda Blue" by Miles Davis, because chances are, if you're into jazz, you might have already started with "Kinda Blue, and then you might have went to this album here. But if by some off chance, dear listener out there, if you started with his album, well, thanks to us, talked about it here tonight. Well, first of all, thank you. Second of all, go to "Kinda Blue" by Miles Davis. You can thank me later. It's an iconic jazz album for a reason.
It is, and I can't disagree with that recommendation. It is one of the greatest jazz albums of all time. And very much a wonderful listen anytime, at any point. So, yeah, man, we did it. We made it through the Blues and the Abstract Truth. And if you made it through the Blues and the Abstract Truth, and again, you want to listen to something else, Ryan recommends "Kinda Blue" by Miles Davis. I recommend "Out to Lunch" by Eric Dolphy, based on the Blues and the Abstract Truth by Oliver Nelson, which we gave an average of 7.5 out of 10. But yeah, I was not expecting us to be 3 points apart, man. Like, for those of you who don't understand, this is the kind of, we did not fight on this episode, but this is the kind of disagreement that is akin to the likes of, just off my memory, Public Enemy, Sabrina Carpenter, Bruce Springsteen, just to name a few.
Yeah. And that's why I did struggle with my overall rating, because I didn't have a bottom track here, but overall though, with this album, I feel like it had highlights and good moments here or there, but it never quite reached the pinnacle of hey, this is a good jazz album for me to listen to, something that I would go back to again. But that's just my opinion, just my thoughts. Not saying that I'm the tell-all for everybody, but that was just my experience.
Yeah, and I very much appreciate you sharing that and being completely honest, because honesty is always the best policy here on Hey, Listen to This, right next to recommending Phil Collins for some reason. So, with Oliver Nelson being put to the wayside, Ryan, it is now your turn to give us what we're talking about next week. So, what are we talking about next week?
Oh man, so I have something fun cooked up for next week's episode of Hey, Listen to This. So, Matt, some time has passed since the big music festival that has happened, Coachella, the Coachella Music Festival, and I was kind of paying attention to a couple of the different acts that were playing Coachella during its runtime this year, and there was two acts notably that drew my attention, and there was one act who performed a notable set, and then the other act did a cover of said act. So I'm gonna have you pick between those two acts, and the way that I'm gonna have you do that is pick between two things. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Well, let's see where this one goes.
All right, so I'm going to have you pick between 100 horses or butterflies.
Okay, all right. 100 horses or butterflies. I feel like this could go 1,000 different directions. I'm not sure which any of those directions are. You know what? Let's go butterflies.
All right, Matthew. Is it too late to say that I'm sorry.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
You know where we're going.
I should know where we're going, but please fill in the blanks.
So for next week's episode of Hey Listen to This, we are going to be going up north to be talking about a Canadian singer. And that Canadian singer, his name is Justin Bieber. And the album that we're going to be talking about on the next week's episode of Hey Listen to This is Swag.
Oh boy. All right. You know what? That's on me. I forgot. I didn't put two and two together. I had forgotten about Bieber doing what he did. Yeah. Okay. This is Justin Bieber has entered the conversation some way, somehow. And we are going from 60s jazz to this. Okay. Challenge accepted. Let's do this.
Oh man, I can't wait. It's gonna be a fun time. So, dear listener out there, if you've never listened to Swag by Justin Bieber, make sure you check it out before next week's review. That way you can have opinions about that album, and then you can have opinions about the opinions that me and Matt are gonna be bringing to the table, for better for worse, because this is gonna be a fun review that me and you are gonna be diving into next week. So. Yeah, despite the reservations and the feelings that you and I might be having about like diving into Swag by Justin Bieber next week, you know what? I'm kind of yearning for it, man.
Lord help us.